I've been driving rigs for 18 years. Long hauls. Empty roads. The kind of life where your best friend is static-filled country radio and the voice in your own head. Nothing much shakes me anymore. But one night, somewhere along Highway 87 in New Mexico, I picked up a hitchhiker. And what happened next still keeps me awake every time I try to close my eyes. It was close to midnight. Sky clear. Stars burning. I just fueled up at a quiet gas station, the kind with flickering lights and a single-board cashier who looked like he hadn't spoken to a soul in hours. I grabbed coffee, hit the road, and that's when I saw him. A figure standing by the roadside, thumb out, backpack slung over one shoulder. Pale, tall, maybe late 20s. What struck me most wasn't his appearance, it was that he was smiling. Not friendly smiling. But like he already knew something. Something about me. I should have kept driving. But I slowed. Rolled the window down. "Where you headed?" I asked. "Wherever you're going," he said, and climbed in like we'd done this before. We drove in silence for a while. I figured he'd doze off or throw in some small talk. But after 20 minutes he said, "You still talk to your brother, Dave?" I stiffened. I never told him my name. "My brother's dead," I muttered. He smiled again, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Yeah, since '07. Elk Ridge, right? The accident with the river. Wasn't your fault." My blood ran cold. I glanced at him. "Who the hell are you?" He looked at me calm. "You know who I am. You just don't want to remember." I damn near pulled the rig over. My hands were shaking. He leaned in, voice low and steady. "You should have picked up that call. You waited. You were out drinking with that waitress from Amarillo. You remember now." I hit the brakes. Art. The truck shuddered to a stop. I turned to face him. But he was gone. Door shut. No trace. Like he'd never been there. Except my passenger seat had a wet stain like river water. And a photo. Bet. It was my brother. Smiling. I don't pick up hitchhikers anymore. I don't drive through New Mexico. And every now and then, late at night, I hear that voice again in the static of my CB radio. You should have picked up the call. The road after that moment stretched endlessly ahead of me, black and indifferent under the weight of my headlights. I didn't move for a long time. My hands stayed locked on the wheel, every tendon stiff like a steel cable, heart pounding behind my ribs in a rhythm that felt too loud for the silence around me. I looked again at the passenger seat. The photo was still there. Still curled slightly at the edges, smudged in the corner like someone had held it too tightly with damp fingers. My brother's face stared back at me from it, younger than I remembered, with a crooked grin, the same one he used to flash when we got away with something. It was a picture I hadn't seen in years. Maybe decades. The stain on the seat hadn't dried. It shimmered under the overhead cab light, not like water, but thicker, darker. I reached out, almost against my will, and touched it. Cold. Not like ice, but deep cold. Bone cold. I jerked my hand back and wiped my fingers on my jeans, though the dampness clung to my skin like it didn't want to let go. I finally started driving again, slow at first, as if the truck itself wasn't sure it wanted to go forward. The tires hummed a low, uncertain tune against the asphalt, and my headlights barely pushed back the darkness anymore. The radio, which had been off, clicked on by itself. Not music. Just white noise. Static, thick, steady, but with something underneath. Like a voice buried deep. Not talking. Whispering. My heart seized and I turned the dial to shut it off, but the volume turned up instead. The sound grew sharper, more insistent, words just out of reach, like the voice was saying my name in a loop but never quite finishing it. Da-da. I killed the engine at the next rest stop. Couldn't take it anymore. Just a dusty lot off the highway with one cracked vending machine and a rotting bench. I stepped out of the truck, needing air, needing something real. The desert night wrapped around me, still and too quiet, not even wind. I lit a cigarette. My fingers shook, but I held it together. Watched the glow at the tip flicker orange and red, like it was the only source of warmth left in the world. There was movement in the mirror. Not mine. I turned fast, too fast, hard in my throat. But there was no one. Just the mirror, dirty and scratched, catching a sliver of moonlight. But I had seen something. A flash of a shape. A silhouette in the cab. Leaning forward like it had been watching me through the windshield. I climbed back in, slammed the door. Locked it. The cab was empty. Quiet. The photo was gone. Not on the seat. Not on the floor. Just gone. I told myself it had fallen between the seats, maybe slid under the dash. But even as I looked, I knew that wasn't it. Then my phone lit up. A missed call. No number. Just unknown. Call time 11:46 p.m. Same time my brother had died all those years ago. The hair on my arms rose, my chest felt hollow, and the air inside the cab seemed thinner, harder to breathe. I sat there, engine off, not daring to touch the phone again. But it rang. Again. Unknown. No ringtone. Just the vibration, slow and deliberate like a heartbeat. I let it ring. And then I answered. But there was no sound. Just the same static from the radio. Only this time it wasn't just a whisper. It was breathing. Wet, labored, dragging breaths. Like lungs full of water. Like someone drowning on the other end. And beneath that, a voice. Not mine. Not my brother's. But something else. Something older. You can't outrun it, Dave. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you like this story. The voice cut out as suddenly as it had begun. Silence. Not the kind you find in a quiet room or in the hush between songs. This was a silence that felt unnatural, like the world had stopped breathing. Even the night insects, those constant companions of the open road, had gone mute. My phone screen stayed lit for a few seconds longer, the call duration blinking. 13 seconds. Then it faded to black. I sat there frozen, hands still clutching the phone, watching my own reflection in the windshield. My face looked pale. Hollow. Not like me. Like I'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. There were shadows under my eyes I didn't recognize. And somewhere behind my reflection, deep in the cab, I thought I saw another shape again. Brief. Faint. Gone when I blinked. I needed to get moving. Anything was better than sitting in that stagnant air, under that big moon and the quiet stars that watched like they knew what was coming. The truck started with a low, reluctant groan. The engine felt different, like it didn't want to carry what was now inside. Like it knew. I pulled back onto the highway. The darkness swallowed the truck almost instantly, and the yellow lines in the center of the road seemed to stretch and bend unnaturally, as if the road had no end, just looped on itself forever. I passed an old rusted road sign, half covered in dust and vines. Elk Ridge 16 miles. My stomach clenched. Elk Ridge. Where it had happened. Where he'd died. I hadn't been back since the funeral. I couldn't. The details were still carved into me like grooves in a record. My brother Ryan had called that night, left 3 voicemails. I ignored them. I was in the middle of a shift, halfway through a bottle of whiskey with that waitress, Lori from the Amarillo diner. He'd gone hiking up by the river we used to swim in as kids. Slipped, cracked his head on the rocks. Drowned in 6 feet of cold water, face down. They found his body the next morning, curled up like a child. I told myself for years there was nothing I could have done. That even if I had answered the phone, it would have been too late. But I never believed it. Not really. Now, with the road pulling me closer to that place, I felt something crawling under my skin. Like regret had finally taken shape, put on flesh, and sat breathing in the passenger seat again. I passed a mile marker. Then another. And then, in the distance, headlights. A pair of them. Dim, flickering. Car maybe. Parked sideways across the shoulder, hazards dead, one door wide open. I slowed the truck as I approached. Something about it was wrong, not just in the way it looked abandoned, but in how it felt. I pulled up alongside, engine idling. It was an old Chevy Nova. Navy blue. Rust at the wheel wells, one tire low. The driver's door hung open like someone had left in a hurry. The interior dome light flickered, dying battery revealing an empty front seat and a jacket draped over the passenger side. And on the hood, propped like an offering, was another photograph. I left the cab. I didn't want to. But something in me, something I can't explain, moved my feet before my mind caught up. The wind had picked up slightly, dry and whispering through the desert brush. Gravel crunched under my boots as I approached the car. I looked at the photograph. It was me. Not a child. Not a teenager. Me now. Sitting in my truck, head turned just slightly to the side as if looking at someone next to me. But I had no memory of that moment. No idea who took it. My mouth went dry. I picked it up with 2 fingers like it might bite me. On the back, written in a shaky hand. You still don't see it, do you? The wind rose behind me. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Wet. Coming from the edge of the highway. Not fast. Not aggressive. Just deliberate. The kind of step someone makes when they know you're not going anywhere. I turned. And though I couldn't make out a face yet, I could see the shape. A man. Tall. Soaked to the skin. Water dripping from his sleeves. From his hair. Pattering onto the dry road in steady beats. He took one more step forward and stopped, just at the edge of the headlights. His face still hidden in shadow. He raised one arm slowly, and pointed back toward my truck. I didn't move. I couldn't. Then from the open cab of the truck, my radio snapped on again. Static. And this time, under it, my brother's voice. You let me go once. Don't do it again. I stood rooted by the abandoned Chevy, the night pressing in around me like damp cloth. My boots felt too heavy to lift, my fingers stiff with something colder than the desert air. The man didn't move. He stood just beyond the reach of the headlights, motionless but watchful, his soaked silhouette swaying faintly in the stillness, not from wind, but like something unseen was tugging him gently back and forth. I couldn't see his face, but somehow I didn't need to. I knew what it looked like. My brother's face. Not as I remembered him, full of life and half a grin, but pale, swollen from water, eyes half lidded, mouth slightly open like he'd been calling my name before the river took the breath from his lungs. I backed away slowly, careful not to turn my back. The picture was still in my hand, the edges now wet even though the air was dry. I dropped it. By the time I reached the truck, I was shaking. I climbed in, locked the doors, started the engine but didn't drive. Not yet. I looked ahead through the windshield. The road was wrong. I'd just come down it, but now, stretched out in the headlights, it looked unfamiliar. No signs. No lines. Just cracked pavement bleeding off into the brush like it had been forgotten for decades. The kind of road you find on old maps and in stories people don't like to tell. The headlights caught movement again. Not the man. Something else. A shape further up the road. A figure, no two. One smaller than the other. They flickered in and out of the beam like mirages. Standing hand in hand, perfectly still. Then they were gone like a breath wiped from glass. My CB crackled. A burst of static, sharp, high-pitched, then a low hum like someone humming a lullaby into the receiver. No words. Just a tune I knew but couldn't name. Something from childhood, maybe. Something we used to sing in the backseat on long trips with Mom and Dad. And then, the voice again. You're close now. It wasn't Ryan this time. It was older. Heavier. Like gravel and earth and rain. Like it had been buried somewhere deep and dragged itself to the surface just to speak. I threw the truck into drive. The wheels fought me, not skidding, not stuck, just slow. Like I was dragging something behind me. Something that didn't want to be left behind. The speedometer crept upward 10, 20, 25. But the road didn't pass beneath me the way it should have. I watched the horizon, waiting for the bend that should have come. I remembered it clearly, the one just before the rusted cattle fence and the old sign for Elk Ridge's city limits. But it never came. The landscape stayed the same. The brush. The fence posts. Even a twisted dead tree to the right of the road. I passed it once, then again. Then a third time. I gripped the wheel tighter, jaw clenched. The truck wasn't moving forward. The road was circling me. I stopped again. Killed the engine. Silence slammed down like a lid on a coffin. The desert around me felt like a painted backdrop, now flat, unreal. My breath clouded the window even though it shouldn't have. It was warm outside. And I saw something in the fog glass. Writing. 3 words written in reverse from the outside. Get out now. I jumped. Wiped the window with my sleeve. Nothing there. I turned around, heart hammering. The cab behind me was dark but not empty. The darkness had weight now. It settled across the sleeper like a shape curled in shadow. I reached back without thinking, flicked the dome light. And it turned on. There was someone lying on the bed. Covered by my old flannel blanket. Bare feet sticking out. Wet feet. Muddy. The soles streaked with river silt. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then the blanket stirred. Slowly. The figure rolled slightly toward me, and a pale hand slipped out, fingers curled loosely around something small and shiny. My brother's watch. I hadn't seen it since the day of the accident. Since they pulled him out. It had been strapped to his wrist, but the coroner told us the glass had shattered and water had filled the casing. It still ticked. And now here it was inside my truck, ticking again, inside the hand of a thing that shouldn't exist. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look, but I did. A message. From unknown. You have to finish the drive. You owe him that. I looked down at the dashboard. My fuel gauge had dropped sharply from 3/4 full to just above empty. Impossible. I just filled up less than an hour ago. Then the dome light flickered. The shape under the blanket stirred again. A low rasp escaped the darkness, half breath, half whisper. And one word. Dave. The whisper in the cab wasn't loud, but it was enough to strip the warmth from my skin. It spoke my name the way my brother used to, in that soft, tired drawl he had when he called late at night and just wanted to talk. I turned in my seat, heart pounding in my ears. The shape on the bed hadn't moved again. The hand, still curled around the cracked wristwatch, rested gently on the blanket like it belonged there, like it had never left. The dome light buzzed faintly above me, casting the cab in an amber haze. My breath was slow and shallow. I wanted to scream. To run. But some part of me knew that wouldn't matter now. I was too far in. This wasn't about a ghost or a haunting. This was about a moment I'd tried to outrun for years, stretched thin across every mile I'd driven, tucked away in every unopened voicemail and unfinished sentence. I reached back slowly and took the watch. It was cold. Colder than anything should have been out here in the middle of the desert. The band was torn. Cracked leather. There was still mud caked into the bevel. And yet it ticked. A soft, fragile sound. Like it was counting down. I stared at it. At the hands frozen at 2:16. The time they estimated he drowned. I'd memorized that fact without meaning to. It stuck in my head like a splinter. The shape beneath the blanket didn't vanish. It didn't move. But it felt lighter now. Faded. As though the thing under there had exhaled for the first time in years. I turned the key. The truck coughed back to life, headlights weak and flickering now, like the engine was fighting a weight still clinging to the axles. But the road ahead, the impossible, looping road, had changed. Just slightly. In the distance I saw a glow. Dim, yellow-orange. Like the sickly color of sodium street lamps. And a sign. Not rusted this time. Not broken. Elk Ridge 3 miles. I started driving. The miles unspooled like ribbon. The silence returned, but it no longer pressed against my skull. It sat with me instead. Like an old friend. Like someone in the passenger seat who no longer needed to be seen. The truck crested a rise and Elk Ridge came into view. It hadn't changed. Not in the ways that mattered. Same squat little buildings with peeling paint, same diner with a tilted neon sign. Same bridge over the river, its iron bones rusted and rattling in the breeze. I slowed as I reached the turnoff. Gravel crunched beneath the wheels. The road narrowed into a dirt path. Trees leaned overhead, their branches creaking like bones in the dark. And then I saw it. The river. Black and still under the moonlight. The current moved like something half asleep, slow and uncaring. I parked just beyond the guardrail, headlights casting long shadows across the ground. I climbed out. The watch was still in my hand. It ticked louder now. Or maybe it only felt that way. Like it was synced with my heartbeat. I walked toward the bank. The air was damp and thick, filled with the scent of moss and old stone. I stopped at the edge, toes just touching the line where mud began. And I saw him. Standing knee-deep in the water. Ryan. He was facing away, head bowed slightly, arms at his sides. His shirt clung to his back, waterlogged and heavy. Hair soaked flat. The image of him from that last voicemail clawed its way back into my mind, the sound of him laughing, tired and drunk, asking me to call back, to meet him out here, just like we used to when we were kids. He didn't move when I called his name. Didn't turn. Didn't speak. But I stepped forward anyway into the river. The water was shockingly cold. It bit through my jeans, soaked my boots instantly. With each step, the current pulled at my legs, subtle but firm, like it wanted to keep me there. I reached him. He didn't look at me. But his mouth moved. Just once. A single word. I couldn't hear it. Then he held out his hand. I stared at it, trembling slightly, water running down his wrist. And I placed the watch in his palm. He closed his fingers around it. Tight. Like it mattered. And then, for the first time, he turned. His face wasn't bloated or twisted or monstrous like I'd feared. It was his face. Tired. Set. Familiar. Eyes that looked like mine, only softer. Lips parted like he wanted to speak but couldn't. Or maybe there were no words left. The watch stopped ticking. The sound of the river seemed to swell, rushing past my knees with sudden warmth. When I blinked, he was gone. Just water in front of me. Still and dark and cold. I stood there until the sun began to rise, a smear of pink and orange on the horizon, chasing the stars back to wherever they came from. By the time I returned to the truck, the cab was dry. Empty. The photograph on the dash, the one with me looking sideways, was gone. The CB was silent. My fuel tank? Half full again. I started the engine. No more static. No more voices. Just the road. And this time it moved. Sometimes, when the radio crackles late at night or when I pass a hitchhiker standing too still, I remember the feel of that river water soaking into my bones. I don't stop for strangers anymore. And I never ignore a phone call, even from numbers I don't recognize. Because once you've met what follows you in the silence, once you've seen the shape your guilt can take, you learn one truth that never leaves you. Some roads remember you, even when you try to forget them. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you like this story.